Tina is the co-founder and CEO of Station, which is a blockchain-based labor marketplace where people can find the best opportunities across the Web3 ecosystem and where Web3 communities can attract and retain the best talent. So very excited to have you, Tina. Could you start off just by introducing yourself and giving us the story of why you started Station, and in particular, what were the problems you saw across both Web 2 and Web 3 state of work that kind of inspired you to start the company?
Totally. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. Before jumping into kind of the crypto world, I actually have been in your shoe. I've been a venture investor myself. Before that, I've been a product builder and really a creator myself. So I wanted to, pursue a career that focuses a lot more on the multidisciplinary approach of, finding meaningful work. And that's something that I think I've been passionate about for a long time. Kind of going into venture was kind of, one leeway into understanding, if internet is really this, great way to, connect long tail demand with long tail supply, then why kind of are most people still not working at great places that they want to work? And that's actually the very beginning of what's now called the creator economy, when companies like Patreon, Twitch, and Substack, and many others start to emerge, where people start to question, a lot of the creators that are creating all the values of Web 2 platforms, are actually not getting fairly compensated for the amazing IP that they've created. So kind of both the value flow and the workflow are changing, where the way that people discover work and find like-minded people are mostly embedded in the tools themselves, where they find really great engineers from GitHub, they find really great designers from Figma. Kind of when I got into crypto was when I realized that a lot of the questions that remain unanswered, kind of when I was studying those companies, start to really click together when the data flow and really understanding how different actors in the blockchain ecosystem can interact with one another in a more interoperable and open and transparent manner. But also it's about, honestly, a new way of thinking about your identity as a worker, because now you are, you can be a part of many organization, which, many of them are now called DAOs, which is another big thing that's happening in crypto, where many people are just coming together very authentically around a shared mission. And, usually, they kind of raise funds in the beginning, and over time, want to find a way to effectively deploy those capital into something valuable that they believe in. And, all those things combined kind of, made me think about as someone who's very obsessed with studying kind of markets and networks, what actually will give birth to this next generation of networks, and next generation of creators. Shall we see this, enormous emergence of anons, which are people that don't really have a real identity revealed online, but are very clearly knowledgeable about many subjects and are actually creating value by showcasing their work on forums, writing proposals, like authentically contributing to these communities, and getting paid for it, both in the form of tokens, but also USDC, despite the promise that DAO have around enabling work, and despite the promise of these online communities have about giving identity to a new class of creators. The infrastructure actually doesn't exist. So in order to build something, as you said, like the labor marketplace, it's almost like, I always talk about this with my team, which is like, it's almost like building Airbnb when no one knows how to take pictures of their homes. So kind of we're in this phase where we actually are like kind of, have our sleeves rolled up and like going into each community and DAO and in a very unscalable way, understanding how can we really supercharge their operations. So that's kind of where Station is right now, which is kind of, we're building a set of toolkits to help DAOs, effectively vet, onboard, and like reward and manage their talent and contributors. And, by using this new NFT standard that we designed, because we believe it's a more interoperable identity system. And over time, as we grow our product, then and marketplace will emerge, because a lot of the identities that we create on the platforms will be kind of bootstrapping the demand side of the market, which are the contributors looking for work.
Yeah, you touched on a number of exciting themes, and clearly it is a very personal journey for you. So maybe we can just take a deeper dive into how Station fits into everything that you've been describing. And I know you're in those building stages today, but if we start with the contributor side of things, can you walk us through, who are these contributors that Station is helping to with their work and acting as the hub for work? And in particular, I know you're focused on a couple of overarching missions, one being, digital reputation. What does that mean? How does blockchain enable a new way of forming your reputation online, and how does Station fit into that?
So to put it simply, right now, how we can help contributors is that it's pretty hard when you join a Discord, if many of you have that experience, to figure out like what's happening. So we want to be this, information, almost like visualization and management, where, you can go on to Station, which is like a reception desk. And that's kind of, aligned with the Station metaphor of everything that's happening within the community. So that's kind of the step one of a contributor's journey. But after that, they actually want to, either find a project to work on, a network with the people within the community, or just, kind of contribute creative ideas to get recognized. And once they get, enough votes or vouchers from the community members, they basically get a membership NFT, which identifies them as a contributor. And the NFT actually, has a lot of metadata around their role, their guild, in the future. Like if people continue to recognize them, even reward them, pay them, like those data will accrue to this NFT as like an employee badge is how we call it. And with that infrastructure and with that data, you're basically able to offer things like payroll, permissions, and access to token-gated apps. And a lot of these Web3 use cases that currently are not talking to each other. We always joke that, we talk about building Web3 tools and SaaS, but, if they're not talking and interoperable with each other, then like we're just building another Web2 software. Like what's the point? So I think a lot of what we're trying to do is trying to kind of be that system of record that actually connects these systems together so that operations on chain can actually be possible. We kind of thought a lot about reputation, especially in the context of contribution, and it's very tempting to think about like what is the global reputation that we can provide, where everyone who comes in we can see what they've done in the past, and potentially there's some type of quantifiable element to that. But we found that an over-reductionist kind of black box algorithm is pretty dangerous. So we want to start off with just local level reputation, meaning that it's actually pretty simple. Like reputation on the local level is what you've done, like when you joined, like how active you are, how your peers consider your contribution to be. So these are the products and experiences that we're enabling to capture that data that will accrue to this person's NFT, which is their identity within the Station network. And over time, as they contribute to other DAOs and other projects and other communities, this record would travel with them. And like, obviously this would continue to accrue value. And if they, like, let's say like the beauty of Web3, where someday like hate our front end and decided that, they want to actually bring this data elsewhere, we want to make it possible so that, they can build their own front end where they carry some of their work history and showcase only data that they want to show. So yeah, that's the journey so far.
Maybe one more thing to touch on the contributor side. I know kind of where you sit in the ecosystem, or where you will sit, you'll be in a uniquely strong position to onboard new contributors into Web3, and I know that's one of your missions as well. So can you talk about just how that fits into your broader mandate, and what you see as the avenues, especially work-related avenues for bringing new people into the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that there's things that technology can solve and things that technology cannot solve. And that's kind of been our thesis from day one. It's like one way to showcase a new way of working is by, showcasing that work can look very different and diverse in Web3, and embodying that values ourselves. And one of the initiatives that we care a lot about is an initiative called Newsstand, which is a way to work with practitioners in the space and people that have gone through crazy journey with very untraditional background and tell their story. And we're kind of wanting to launch a series about that as well. But we're just telling the story of just people with really like diverse perspective that got into crypto. And this is actually one way where we believe that, by seeing that people like you, people like me, right, can contribute, that's where they can actually find an authentic way of feeling like they actually belong to this place. So we believe that it's not something technology can solely solve, but then the thing that technology can solve is actually, making a lot of the, on-chain operations much more kind of user-friendly. Because right now, like in order to actually run an on-chain organization, there's just the workflow is very fragmented. The databases are not talking to each other, as I just mentioned. And a lot of decisions are also arbitrarily made, so that, neither side is having a great experience. The leaders are like, I thought I was running a DAO and now all the power is centralizing on me and responsibilities are on me. And the members feel like they're not empowered to actually, take a step up and like, own that leadership, because there's no clear pathway to do so either. So from a product level, we just believe there's a lot of potential in like kind of marrying the two more closely together.
Absolutely. And then maybe just shifting focus over to the DAOs, you mentioned them a couple of times. Maybe just for the audience, anyone who's not familiar, just tell us what a DAO is. Obviously, there's such a broad range today, and that's growing. But who are the DAOs that you're really seeking to serve? And maybe just give a example of a couple projects where they would be coming onto station to find contributors.
To be honest, we're still in a very experimental phase. So we're really optimizing for breadth rather than depth. So we have, NFT projects in the pipeline. We have one DeFi protocol. We have, some project level protocol. We have very social vibey DAOs like Pusui in the pipeline. So it's a pretty wide range, I would say. And to be honest, like I think DAOs are so early that hopefully in the next quarter or so, like we're able to discover what are the DAOs that actually will resonate with, a more decentralized way of operations. But back to your question about hiring, we totally agree. That's why we think that, there's a lot of, I think, projects that have the attempt of doing, kind of some type of computational reputation where it's like, oh, you did this many GitHub commits and, you get like a score as a dev, which we believe might be valuable if it's really self-contained in certain contexts and the parameters are clear. But then like, it's also very easily gameable. So it doesn't really scale. So we actually think that back in the good old days of, reputation is just about word of mouth. And the one thing that, blockchain systems and networks are built are actually a lot of it is also inspired by this gossiping system. So the idea that, people are actually social oracles where everyone, as long as, they have the incentive to participate in curating the network, they would. It's kind of a big bet that we're making, where it's like we make everyone this incentivized node of participating in curating kind of who gets in. It's almost like this, referral project that is kind of powered by a lot of token incentives. So that's kind of one way that we're thinking about it. But of course, like, as you get more involved in the community and then you get added to projects, you get promoted, you get paid, like these data are also very valuable as, just basic reputation data as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you referenced some of I know you're working on a couple protocols that will power the marketplace kind of around reputation rewards. Could you give us just a little bit more detail about that? Obviously, you're still in the early phases, but what does it take to build something like that? What are some of the variables you're looking at, in terms of balancing the network, all of those considerations?
Yeah, I think the tough part about building on-chain protocols, especially when you're focusing on Web3 applications, is that you don't want to sacrifice too much on performance either. So a lot of the trade-off that we're making is that like, what are the actual necessary data we actually need to put on chain, and what are the data that we can put off chain? That's one. And the second thing is flexibility. Like if a protocol is very opinionated, for example, about a certain standard, like even small things like how you want to query like someone's or how you want to like format an organization or DAO, like that standard is like it's almost like in corporations you have like EIN and you have all these the identity about a corporation, but in DAOs that still is not agreed upon. And then like we're actually working very closely with kind of some of the people from Ethereum Foundation and a few other groups about like thinking just like finally like guys, let's just make a decision about like what we should agree upon. So like I think standard is like a huge challenge of building protocol in this space. I guess the last thing I want to mention, which I have very strong opinions on, and I talk about this with a lot of the other founders in this space as well, which is around the relationship between product and protocol. I think in crypto, a lot of times it seems like, protocol like kind of is the supremacy of protocol, where like unless I think the protocol really is that driver of value, like Uniswap and most of the DeFi protocol, I would say is the case. But for a lot of the consumer facing apps, or even just like the kind of new wave of like, Web3 native SaaS or software, product is still the main way of driving usage, and which can actually generate really high fidelity on-chain data for your protocol and increase adoption of your protocol in the first place. So I would say there still needs to be a lot of investment there. We believe the first phase is literally just about putting some of the most important information in a very secure and eventually privacy preserving way on chain to, again, enable the operation that I just mentioned. Like if this person, is this role, like, and then they use our product so that, when I promote someone in our front end, like you get also like the metadata evolves on the NFT side, like how can that automatically, unlocks access to payment, to permissions and access to these functionalities, is something that we really focus on. Right now, I think a lot of the governance decision is kind of either a one token, one vote mechanism, right? And it's really favoring the economic holders of the token versus people that actually added value. But a lot of people are like, oh, reputation weighted token, like voting, or reputation weighted assets. But like, where does that reputation come from? So we believe that like before overcomplicating things, like first of all, we need to know like how much work they've actually done, how much contribution they've actually done, and any type of signifier around that, that is encoded in like a system of record. And the other thing that is I guess somewhat creative of the solutions that we're very excited about is actually like in the future when there's multiple solutions for identity, multiple identifier of your relationship with the org. Let's say this org like issues this badge, but also issues POAP, but also issues a bunch of on-chain stuff that wanted to incentivize their employees or their contributors. Then it gets really messy really quickly, especially when someone's contributing to many DAOs. So we believe that, there can be this almost like a meta NFT where there's a bunch of metadata slots where, they actually point to other token URIs where, we can basically integrate with any other protocols that want to, that basically curate data from their APIs or their protocol as well into the NFT itself. So this NFT is like an ever evolving presence that connects, integrates with other data sources, but also continues to give access in a dynamic way.
Your role as, in the future state, the labor marketplace, what do you think about the role of pseudonymity? That's obviously actuality today, but, what are some of the challenges that you foresee coming up if that continues to be the case, and especially as it relates to the DAOs and the contributors on your network?
Oh, that's a great question. To be honest, like I think that privacy is very much so in theory right now, especially on chain. Like, and I think we're like actively thinking about like ways that we can like obscure some of the attestation about someone's identity into like zero knowledge badges, for example, which is, some of the other companies in the space are doing, like Sysmo and some other ones. That, trying to basically showcase a proof that you've done something without actually revealing exactly what you've done. So those are some of the creative implementations that could take place down the line. But right now, to be honest, we are not necessarily focusing on that because most of the information that we are curating are not necessarily very like kind of infringement of privacy at this stage. And then we work pretty closely with, or kind of are in close relationship with a few other solutions in the space, like Privy, for example, is trying to, basically become a service provider that basically store most of the sensitive data, but basically have an encryption on top of that. So when you actually call those data, there's like, bi-directional encryption on both sides. So it's secure when developer actually needs that information. So that's like one solution that we can go for.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I just have one more quick question to wrap up with us today. This has been really fascinating. But obviously you spend a lot of time thinking about the future of work in your day-to-day. So would love for you to share, some of your thoughts on, 10 years from now, if you're successful at Station, which I'm sure you will be, and we believe in, and if all goes well in the crypto ecosystem, what does work look like, and what's Station's role in that future?
Totally. We hope that like a lot of the things that we had the privilege of having, like, being in America, even like, finding a group of friends in college, finding school clubs, and in professional places, like it's very easy to form a community in kind of, very developing markets. I think that the luxury is much less so for a lot of emerging markets, where I think a lot of them is the first time for them to work shoulder to shoulder with some of the best talent in Silicon Valley, for example, in the same community. And in the past, right, I know that we didn't really cover Fiverr or Upwork and not all these like traditional marketplaces, but what they did was that in some way they kind of deprive that identity and like that sense of ownership from the worker. So how can we in some way kind of ensure that the workers that have contributed value are compensated fairly for also the work that they've done. So that's honestly the future that we want to see, is people around the world, regardless of where they are, can come together and work together on something that they like want to accomplish together.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. It was really exciting, and we're really excited to see what you're building. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Lisa.